Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Karen, for inviting me. When Brandy actually gave me this topic, I said yes. I'm not certain why, because I've actually never hired a postdoc. Can't hear me? Is that better? So I've actually never hired a postdoc, and as we go through, you might find out why, all right? So I've started going on these kind of talks every once in a while, and what Karen pointed out is whether or not you can live in the area of the country where you might go. So I've decided to take a Sheldon Cooper kind of approach here, and if you don't know who that is, he's on Big Bang Theory. So he has a thing he calls Fun with Flags, so I'm calling it Fun with Augusta. So a couple of years ago, I went out and gave a talk someplace and talked about the Butt Bridge. It's on the left down there, it's not on the right. The guy on the right is General Sherman, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Confederate Powder Works today. So the Butt Bridge was built in the early 1900s. It actually celebrates a guy named Archibald Butt. I think I changed my name, but they called him Archie Butt in Augusta. So it turns out he was a colonel in the Army, but he was really well known for being an ambassador or an undersecretary to Mexico, and this was during the Teddy Roosevelt years. So his claim to fame is dying on the Titanic. So they built this bridge in Augusta, and it was the first memorial to an individual who died on the Titanic. Anyway, if you visit Augusta, you should go see the Butt Bridge. It's always 15th Street Bridge. Now on the right-hand side is General Sherman. I think everybody knows him as being the guy who marched through the South and burned all the major cities. Well, somehow he spared Augusta, so Augusta was not burned during the Civil War. So the big question was, why didn't he burn it? So the rumor is, or the myth is really, is that his girlfriend lived there, and so he spared the city. The bad thing was, they actually published that myth in the Augusta Chronicle, which is still our local newspaper, and General Sherman wrote back to the Augusta Chronicle, and you can read the letter. He said he was sorry to inform the Augusta people that that wasn't the case at all, and he'd get a few of his buddies to come down and burn the city if they'd like. Anyway, so those are the two things that I've told in the past. So the new one today is the Confederate Powder Works, which was built in 1861. Now, if you think about the Confederate Civil War, the Civil War was actually only about 4 years long, so it was 1861 to 1865. So it turns out this is the Confederate Powder Works. It's still standing today. It was built in 1861, and it's the only thing that the South built during the war, and we still have it. That's the canal. So the canal was built to actually power the electric works for the mills and what have you, and this was a mill sometime later. So we do still have the one structure that was built by the Confederacy. All right, so now I'm going to give you some harsh realities in three different ways, actually. That's it. You should come to Augusta. So there's three different realities about being a postdoc. So this is looking at there are more postdocs than faculty positions. This is the real truth. So on the left you have the cumulative numbers. Those are the solid lines that you see on the graph, and on the right-hand side are the annual numbers. But those are the ones that are actually in the dotted lines. And so on the bottom you have the years. So what you see is that starting in around 1982, the number of postdocs, or the number of postdocs, this is the blue line now, the cumulative awarded, was only around, 25,000 or something? No, it's not that much, is it? Well, yeah, it's about 25,000. So as you see, we've actually got a large number of postdocs over the years. And if you look now at the cumulative faculty positions, there has not been an increase, and certainly the slope of that line has not kept up with the number of postdocs that we're putting out. If you look at the annual faculty positions or the annual PhDs that are awarded, those are on the right-hand side. You see that once again we have a lot more postdocs now than we have faculty positions. It's just the truth. So another way to look at it is this is done by the Royal Society in Great Britain, in the UK. And so what you have over here on the left-hand side is the number of PhDs. It's 100%, of course. And so what you see is that 53% of the PhDs that graduate, they automatically go into a different career. They don't end up in academia. So 47% of the people start off as a job in academia. But you can see that very rapidly it gets split into two populations. 30% of them stay in academia, some type of academic position, a postdoc or something like that. And 17% who finish their postdoc actually enter a non-university research job. Now then, that 30% that goes forward, they end up splitting off about 27% of them, and they enter that 53% that aren't doing anything related to academia or to research at all. Whereas only about 3.5% progress towards being a professor, and only 0.5% end up being a professor. All right, there's another way to look at this. For every tenure track professorship in the United States, there are roughly 7 postdocs. So that's the reality. So I think you can see what the problem is being a postdoc right now. So there's maybe another way you want to run your lab, or instead of selecting a postdoc, you might want to select a graduate student or even an undergraduate student to run your lab or be in your lab to help you with your research. Don't forget, we're supposed to be talking about how to select a postdoc for your lab, not how a postdoc is supposed to find a job. So my job was a little different than everybody else's. All right, now there's another way to look. This is kind of interesting. This is what Brian was getting at. Where are the 5,600 postdocs that are in the United States? Some of this makes a lot of sense to me. So if you look up there in the Boston area, New York City, there's a density of population there. Same thing for Chicago. That makes a lot of sense. And Atlanta, of course. San Diego, San Francisco makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure about Kansas City. It's got to be the barbecue. Denver, I understand, that's marijuana country. So it makes some sense where some of the postdocs are, but I don't understand some of the others. So that's where the postdocs are, and if you want a job with people who are going to be like you should go to there. All right, so career stages when you hire a postdoc. You either do it early in your career or you do it late in your career. So I'm going to kind of compare and contrast these just a little bit. So I'm a late guy. So when I started in 1979, there weren't very many postdocs that existed. At the University of Michigan, where I did my first postdoc, there were only 2 in the department. I bet there are 30 now. But when I was there were only 2. So grants and publications in 1979 were a lot easier. It was easier to publish, and it was easier to get a grant. And it's also important to know that when I started in 1979, lab workforce was smaller, and it was mostly students. So I didn't have a lot of postdocs at that time. So how do I get my postdocs? There are 4 main ways. As I said, I've never actually hired a postdoc. They've always sought me out. So one of the ways is actually from a former postdoc mentor, and I did my first postdoc with David Bohr. He trained Bob Moreland, and now a woman named Nicole Klee is in my laboratory from Bob Moreland's lab at Drexel. Another way that people get to me is through a previous protege. Stephanie Watts was a postdoc of mine, and she trained Teo Zaz, and Teo did a postdoc, is now a postdoc with me. I also get postdocs from training programs, and these are people who know me at Medical College of Georgia. And so Alan Hairline is in the Department of Surgery. He has a training program, and he sent Patricia Quinez to me to do her postdoc. And finally, the oddest way people get to me is through a meeting. I was actually invited to give, Brandy's smiling, she knows this story. So I was invited to give a talk at the Jackson Cardiovascular Renal meeting in Mississippi. And John Hall sent a car for me to pick me up at the airport because I was an invited speaker. So I saw this woman standing down by the luggage belt, and she had a tube, a poster tube. And so I asked her if she'd like to have a ride to the hotel downtown in Jackson because I had a car coming for me. And she said yes. And so over the next 3 or 4 days, Stella met several people in my laboratory, and eventually she came and did a postdoc in my laboratory. So yesterday, I was standing downstairs at the information booth. I actually don't work there. But a woman came up to me dragging her luggage and asked me if I knew where the luggage drop was. I said, no, I don't have the slightest idea. And so we got to talking. So it turns out her name is Megan Hebke, and she's actually looking for a postdoc position. The next thing I know, she had just missed the Pharmacology Society business meeting, and so we started talking. She's from Atlanta, And so she's going to come over to Augusta to see whether or not she wants to do a postdoc in Augusta. Anyway, so there's a good story for you. Watch out at meetings. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare that early stage, my stage, who is I'm the old guy getting postdocs, to someone who's looking for a postdoc. So it turns out this is the web lab. Sadly, this is not my web lab, and I've had several discussions with my daughter about this. So she's a brand new minted professor at Brown University. She has this web page called the Web Lab. We have one also. Ours is not quite as good as hers, but as equally as competitive. So you can see her over on the right-hand side. She's the blonde. All right, so one of the things that she's done is she's posted a very nice website. And ours really doesn't look as good as this at all. She's the one down here on the left with the glasses. And this is what I think she's done really well. She's not looking for postdocs so much. She's looking for highly motivated scientists to join her lab. And that's a big difference. And so if you're going to hire a postdoc, or if you're looking to hire a postdoc, if you're a young career person, I don't think you have to just do it that way. You can actually do it with a graduate student, or you can do it with an undergraduate student. But a postdoc's another option. Okay, so you can be successful without having to hire a postdoc, but you still can be doing that also. Okay, should I hire a postdoc? It's not for everybody, but there's some questions you need to think about, and some of these have already been discussed. All right. If you're a postdoc or if you're looking for a postdoc, you might want to actually look at these questions at the same time. Can I afford a postdoc? Karen put up the salaries. Well, $43,000 is not the end of it. You also have to pay benefits, parking, and things like that. So a postdoc gets up to be $60,000 to $80,000, depending on where you are in the country. So it might be actually cheaper to get an undergraduate student, you don't have to pay it all usually, or a graduate student who's going to be very much cheaper. How will becoming a mentor affect my career? Karen covered some of that, as did Brian. It makes a big difference because you've got to start thinking about, I should tell you, I came up with this list. At first I thought, okay, I'll put in there, how do I hire a postdoc? That's what I Googled. And after about 3 days, I realized that it's not how I hire a postdoc, it's whether I want to have a baby. And so that's what really came up, and that's what these things are really, truly related to, is whether or not I want to have a baby, okay? So am I truly ready to take on this responsibility? So if you don't think you're ready to have a baby, you probably shouldn't hire a postdoc. How will I make this work on a daily basis? There's only so many hours in the day, guys, so you got to make it work somehow. At some point, you will accidentally hurt your postdoc, and you'll feel like worst mentor ever. It happens. Okay, and you will actually see your faults reflected back at you. That's for sure. So if you decide to be a mentor, will you be able to say goodbye? It's really important. All right, so this is what you need to discuss if you're hiring a postdoc, and if you're looking for a postdoc, these are the things you need to think about. You need to think about independence. These have already been covered. Flexibility. What's a day look like in the lab? Policies regarding leaving the lab. Who owns what? Authorship, salary, and moving expenses. But I think you also need to think about career goals. What are your career goals? We're going to see that here. Now, one thing I didn't realize, I made this list of postdocs out several years ago when I got a mentoring award, and I didn't realize it at the time where these people really ended up. Okay, so there's 43 names up there. The ones in red ended up in academia. And so if you're going to come do a postdoc with me, you're going to have to go into academia. It's a requirement. The two in green down there just got K99s, and so I assume that they're going to go into academia also. So if you want to do a research postdoc that's going to end up in industry, you need to go see Brian, because he's going to help you get into industry. You come to me, I'm going to more likely steer you towards this kind of a job, an academic position, because that's what I was trained in, that's what I know best. So what can I promise? This is how you get to the job in academia. This is what I can promise you, is I can promise you a network, and it will be instant. You'll connect instantly with this group. And so in this next slide, I'll show you what I mean. So the horizontal line is actually my mentors. So Florence Foote is responsible for me being in science, and Tom Mills was actually my last mentor who helped me be a chair. So what you see there is David Bohr, in between Ramesh Bala, who was my doctoral mentor, and David Bohr, who was my first postdoctoral mentor. There's a bunch of names coming off David. I could have an equal number of names or more coming off other individuals. But the ones that were trained by David Bohr were an instant connection for me. And all the people who work with me, all my postdocs, have an instant connection with them. And so this is the network that you inherit. Now, I didn't put Paul Van Houtes up there because he's trained over 200 postdocs. And so you can see what happens here is that my 43 postdocs know Paul's 200 postdocs immediately. So, lastly, it's all been worth it. So I've trained dozens of postdocs, 35 of them have actually got a faculty position. Thank you.